One of the biggest problems that I hear from new foragers is that they can't find the things that they read about in a book or that they hear about on YouTube or they see people talking about on Facebook. They go out and they look all over the place and they can't find that particular plant, and so then they get really frustrated. And the key to finding what you want is going to be to have a wide variety of habitat types and community types within your territory. So you want to have forested areas, but you want some of them to be dry and some of them to be wet. You want some of them to be deciduous. You want some of them to be evergreen, right? You want open areas, right? But some of them should be dry fields and some of them should be moist fields and some of them might be cattail marshes or swamps, right? So just a big variety of habitat types and plant communities is going to be what's going to be the key for finding the different things you want. The more variety you have in your habitat types, the more chance you have of finding the plants you're looking for. In Michigan, there's a huge variety of habitats because of what's known as the Floristic tension zone. So here's our handy map of Michigan, no pun intended. And right across the knuckles here is the Floristic tension zone. And what this really is, it has a lot to do with climate. Above this line, the day length is highly variable compared to below this line because of the 45th parallel, right? So the plants that tolerate what conditions are up here are very different than the plants that tolerate the conditions down here. We have extremely different habitats down here than what we have in the northern part of the Lower Peninsula. So this tension zone that goes right across here is kind of where they mix. And if you ever drive north or drive south, if you're coming from up north, through Michigan, you notice that there's a lot of hardwoods down here. Oaks, maples, things like that. And as you get farther north, there's this band where there's a lot of aspen. And then we get north of that, and then there's a lot of evergreens, and there's still aspen mixed in. Birch, you never see birch, white paper birch down in here. But then on the other hand, you never see sassafras up in here, right? So there's very different ecosystems north and south of the tension zone. And so for me personally, I happen to live right about here, and that's where I do most of my foraging. I have about a 20 square mile territory, and I don't forage the entire 20 square miles, but it's about 20 square miles from surrounding my home, and then I have little patches where I go, different farmers that I work with and different public lands, things like that. And then up here I have what I call my territorial annex. And that's where I go probably once a month during the foraging season, starting in about April and going until November maybe. And I go up there once a month and I spend a weekend up there foraging in my territorial annex. And I don't expect that necessarily everybody can spend a weekend out of every month going someplace else, but it is really good to have an auxiliary or an annex territory to go and forage in. Plants live in communities, and your best chance of finding whatever specific plant you're looking for, your best chance of finding the plant is to find the community that plant lives in. So to increase your chances of finding what you want, you need to increase the variety of plant communities that are in your foraging territory. And so you should be actively searching and actively trying to expand your territory and actively taking inventory in what you do have already so that you know what you're missing. You should, for example, have a variety of water levels in your foraging territory. Some places maybe are under 2 feet of water all year round, and other places might just be a little bit soggy sometimes, and some places might be really dry and they drain really quickly and they never hold water for more than when it's raining. And then there's places that's what's called mesic, which is in the middle between dry and wet. So you want that whole variety of really wet to really dry as part of your different communities in your territory. You also want to look for to have a variety of soils. Different plants like different soils. So some plants like really rich, nutrient-rich soils that are dark and full of organic matter, and other plants like really poor soils that don't have a lot. They compete better when they don't have a lot of nutrients in there because they're really good at extracting what's there, and so they outcompete other plants when there's not a lot of nutrients in the soil. Some plants like sand, some plants like clay, some plants like loam, which is kind of a mixed sand, silt, clay, organic matter. It's just like a jumble of everything, right? Some plants like to grow in more gravelly areas. Some plants like different levels of disturbance. So waters, soils, disturbance. Right? Some plants don't tolerate disturbance well at all, and you need to find some areas that are relatively left alone and don't have a whole lot going on. And then other plants really, really like to be disturbed and will grow right up into the roadsides, and that's the only place you really find them is where it's really, really disturbed. So you need a variety of disturbance levels. If you have a variety of water levels, a variety of soil types, and a variety of disturbance levels, then you're going to get a wide variety of vegetation communities, right? So you may have several different hardwood forests that you go and forage in, but one of them might be dominated by maple, one of them might be dominated by oaks, one of them might be dominated by cherries, but there are all these different hardwood forests. And then you probably will have different types of conifer forests as well. Different types of open areas, different types of shrubby areas. So looking for a wide variety of plant communities, and the way you're doing this is to take inventory of what the dominant plants, doesn't matter if they're forageable plants or not, you want to know the dominant plants in all of your little subsections of your territory, because what you're looking for is places that are different from what you already have, and that's going to give you better chances of finding what you're looking for. One way you can really increase the types of habitats that you have to forage in is to cross ecosystems. And by that I mean, for example, if you lived in Michigan or say Wisconsin or Ontario or someplace that's, level with this area, you could cross that tension zone so that you're foraging in the southern Great Lakes forests, or the southern Great Lakes habitats, and also in the northern Great Lakes habitats. If you live farther north, say in northern Wisconsin or in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, then you may forage in the northern Great Lakes habitats, but also forage north into the boreal habitats. Maybe you live south of here, maybe you're in Illinois or Indiana, right? Those areas, to drive all the way up across the tension zone would be several hours, but you might be able to drive just a few hours south or a few hours west and get into some of the prairie and plains habitats, some of the more Midwestern habitats rather than the Great Lakes habitats. And then those of you who are maybe a little farther to the east, southeast in Ohio, Pennsylvania, places like that, instead of driving north, south, east, west, you might drive up and down in altitude, because those mountainous regions near the tops of the mountains is a very different ecosystem than what you find at the bottoms of the mountains. And even for that matter, farther east in the mountains is very different from what's farther west in the mountains. So you can use the mountains as a way to increase the habitat and community types that you're foraging in. So really, again, just to reiterate, to find what you want requires that you know your territory and you know the habitat types that you have already, and that you have a wide variety in plant communities. So that the only way to do that is it takes time. It takes you have to take time, and you have to establish and learn a territory. You can minimize the amount of time that this takes by actively taking inventory of what you have and then searching specifically for community types that you don't already have. One of the questions I get asked a lot is where to look for places to forage. And of course, the very first place is, besides your own property, is public land. Parks, there's city parks, there's township parks, there's county parks, there's all kinds of state land and things like that. And the rules, almost all have rules about what you can and can't forage. But some of them are pretty lenient, and some of them can be very good foraging places. So just check those rules and see what's going on. Another really good place, a place that's very common for modern foragers to forage, is along rural roadsides. So find your local farming community and go down the dirt roads and find roads that are very not used very often, and then make those roadside edges, the right-of-ways of the roads, make those your territory and start driving them regularly. Be a Sunday driver and cruise up and down them. Another place where you can often find good foraging in rural areas is in the old rural cemeteries. These ones that they have the gravestones are all worn down and you can barely see what's on them anymore. A lot of them are marginally maintained. They're certainly not sprayed with any sorts of chemicals, but they're starting to overgrow in a lot of places, especially around the edges. And you can find some really, really good forage in these old rural cemeteries. And I know I'm certainly going to get some comments about foraging in rural cemeteries, but honestly, I go out there and I'm in these places, and sometimes I think I'm the only one that ever visits. So, go visit your local rural cemeteries and see what they have around the edges. Another thing you can do is go to your local farmer's market and make friends with your local farmer. Take a little bit of time, go and meet them, several weeks in a row, because they're going to see lots of people and they're going to need to see you several times before they really start to make it to click with you. But once you make a connection with a local farmer, they very often will let you come out and pull the weeds out of their fields for them, many of which we know are edible. But in addition to those farm fields, they often have just woodlots and fallow fields and ponds and things like that on their properties that they may be perfectly happy to let you forage in. Sometimes they want a cut, so you go out and you forage things and just teach them about it, teach them how to eat it, and a lot of them are very curious about that. And not all of them, some of them aren't. Some of them are just going to be happy to let you take whatever weeds you want to take. That's fine too. And then the last thing I would suggest in terms of how to find new places to forage is to find foraging buddies. So meet people, join, for example, meetups, go on plant walks, go to different events where there's going to be other foragers. Post things to Facebook that are saying you're interested in foraging with other people in your area. You really want to actively look for other people to forage with, because then you can share territories. You may have things in your current territory that they don't have already, and vice versa. And so sharing those things is a great way to increase what you can find. So really the bottom line here is that in order to find the plants you're looking for, you have to have a wide variety of plant communities, and you have to really know your territory. So I hope you find that helpful.